In a crowded airplane 35,000 feet above the Atlantic, a pregnant woman collapses gasping for breath while terrified passengers and flight attendants scramble for help. No doctor is found. But from the back of the plane, a quiet black teenager rises not with a title, but with knowledge forged in struggle. As he steps into first class past the stares and skepticism, he doesn't just save a life, he challenges every assumption in the room. What unfolds is not just a rescue, but the beginning of a bond that will shake the walls of privilege, prejudice, and power. If stories like this matter to you, Black Stories, heartwarming stories rooted in truth, don't just watch. Feel, share, and stay with us for what comes next. The taxi slowed to a reluctant stop outside Terminal 4 at JFK, its brakes whining under the gray New York morning. Inside Aiden, Kelly sat still for a moment, both hands pressed tightly against the straps of his weathered backpack. He was 17, tall and lean, with the sort of wiry build that came from running errands up and down apartment stairs and living on a modest diet. His hoodie had faded from black to charcoal years ago, and the edges of his jeans had begun to fray. Yet everything he wore was clean, carefully arranged, and worn with quiet pride. He didn't need anyone's approval, not today. Not when this trip meant everything. Still, he hesitated. The cab driver looked over his shoulder. "We're here, kid. You all right?" Aiden nodded, though his stomach churned. He pulled out a folded stack of bills from his back pocket, fingers fumbling slightly as he counted out the exact fare. When he handed it over, his wallet was nearly empty. Only a single $20 bill remained folded neatly in the corner, the one his grandmother had insisted he take as emergency money, even though they both knew everything about this trip was already an emergency in slow motion. He stepped out into the cold. The air hit him hard, colder than he'd expected. He looked up at the terminal. It was massive, sterile, and intimidating. Travelers flowed in and out like streams of water, dragging pristine luggage, talking into AirPods, checking boarding passes on sleek phones. Aiden slung his backpack onto his shoulder and stood there for a beat, the wind tugging at his sleeves, before turning to the trunk and pulling out the small rolling suitcase he had borrowed from a neighbor down the hall. One wheel stuck, forcing him to drag it sideways. That morning, his grandmother, Helen Kelly, had straightened his collar with those same hands that now struggled to thread needles. She was 73, tough as stone, and tethered to an oxygen tank. Her voice rasped when she spoke, but her conviction hadn't wavered for a second when she told him, "You're gonna walk in that room, baby, and make them see what I always seen in you. Doesn't matter what they expect when they look at you. You're there to remind them they were wrong." He had nodded, but hadn't said what he wanted to. That he was scared. That he'd never left New York. That flying felt like a leap too wide for someone who'd spent his life making do. He'd practiced saying thank you in a British accent the night before, then laughed at himself and stopped. Now, standing in the swirling chaos of one of the world's busiest airports, he felt like a single thread in a massive machine. He reached into his pocket and unfolded his boarding pass. Flight to London Heathrow, Global Future Medics Interview Program, Terminal 4, Gate B32. The words looked surreal on paper, more like something he'd forged than earned. But he had earned it through years of studying, between caregiving shifts, memorizing medical texts, and learning to administer his grandmother's medications better than most nursing aides. His biology teacher had written in the recommendation letter, "Aiden Kelly is a once-in-a-generation talent. His understanding of human physiology is intuitive, practical, and born from lived necessity." The screech of expensive tires on pavement turned his head. Not far down the curb, a sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop, its paint glistening under the fluorescent airport lights. A suited driver emerged from the front seat and opened the passenger doors with practiced precision. First came a man in his late 50s, gray at the temples, crisp in a dark suit that seemed tailored to his every movement. His name, though Aiden didn't know it yet, was Justin Miller. The man stepped out with the casual confidence of someone used to being noticed. He glanced around, not in suspicion, but in expectation, as if the world were a room that owed him eye contact. He said something over his shoulder, and then a woman followed, blonde, elegant, clearly pregnant. She held her belly as she stepped out, and her movements, while graceful, betrayed discomfort. She was around 40. Aiden guessed maybe a little older, but there was a poise about her that was unmistakable. Aiden's gaze dropped quickly, not wanting to seem like he was staring, though he had never seen anyone look quite like her in real life, only in magazines he never bought. Airport staff appeared almost instantly. A smiling representative in a navy vest approached the couple with outstretched hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, welcome. We've arranged everything as requested. You'll be through security in no time." Aiden watched from a short distance, unnoticed, his rolling suitcase leaning against his knee. One world stepping out of luxury and into convenience, the other standing just outside the terminal trying to swallow the lump of resentment that rose quietly in his throat. He turned away, not bitter, but suddenly more aware than ever of the weight of his backpack and the tiredness in his legs. He joined the economy line, which wrapped around itself twice the people in it, bleary-eyed and impatient, dragging overstuffed carry-ons. No one greeted him. No one offered assistance. A security guard standing nearby seemed to look at him twice as he passed, following his steps, until Aiden pulled out his boarding pass and held it clearly in view the way his grandmother had taught him. "Make sure they see your purpose before they make up their own," she always said. The two lines, first class and everyone else, moved in parallel, never touching. Aiden glanced to the side and caught a glimpse of the Millers being escorted through a private lane, luggage taken for them, drinks already being offered on a silver tray. He didn't know their names, didn't know that in a matter of hours they would be locked in a life-or-death moment together. For now, they were just two people who had stepped out of a Bentley while he dragged a suitcase that needed to be lifted over every bump in the sidewalk. Still, he wasn't angry. He was used to this choreography of distance, this quiet sorting that happened in airports, classrooms, and office lobbies. As he cleared the first round of security, his bag was pulled for extra inspection. A TSA agent held up his asthma inhaler and asked questions with a tone that wasn't quite accusatory, but far from friendly. Aiden kept his voice calm, respectful the way Helen had trained him to speak to authority. "It's for my grandma, sir. I was holding it for her earlier and forgot it was in there." The man studied him for a beat, nodded once, and waved him through without apology. By the time he reached the gate, his shirt clung slightly to his back and his legs felt heavier than before. He checked his boarding time and sat quietly by the window, watching the planes come and go. Across the terminal, Eugene Miller adjusted in her seat inside the first-class lounge, flipping through a pregnancy magazine as Justin scrolled on his phone. She shifted uncomfortably, pressing a hand to her side. "Braxton Hicks again," she murmured. Justin looked up quickly, his face tightening. "Are you sure it's not something else?" She smiled at him. "It's normal." "Don't worry." He nodded, but his grip on the phone remained tight. He had spent a fortune on this trip, from the custom itinerary to the on-call medical staff in London. The baby was everything to them, especially after the losses. He wasn't taking chances. Neither of them saw the boy across the terminal, eyes focused on a stack of flashcards, silently repeating phrases like pulmonary embolism, shortness of breath, rapid heart rate, chest pain. Aiden flipped the next card and whispered, "Risk factors, pregnancy, immobility, genetic clotting disorders." He had no idea how close that knowledge would come to changing everything for all of them. The boarding call came over the loudspeaker with a calm finality, as if the gate agents knew exactly how much pressure it placed on the hearts of those listening. Aiden Kelly stood, shoulders squared, boarding pass gripped in one hand and the other still tugging along the reluctant wheel of his suitcase. He got in line with the rest of economy, his back stiffening slightly as a woman behind him muttered under her breath about the delay, not quite loud enough to accuse him of anything directly, but clear enough to remind him he wasn't invisible. The line moved slowly. Gate B32 buzzed with the chaos of long-haul fatigue and travel stress, but Aiden kept his eyes forward, focused, repeating quiet facts about blood circulation and respiratory function in his mind like prayer. On the same jet bridge several minutes earlier, Justin and Eugene Miller had boarded first. They had been ushered ahead of the crowd, their seats secured in the front of first class, where privacy walls and fully reclining pods promised a kind of flying experience most passengers would never see. Eugene, now beginning to feel the familiar ache in her lower back, had declined the pre-flight champagne but asked for sparkling water. Her husband remained on his phone, skimming through messages from his team in London, one hand lightly resting on her arm as a token of presence. She leaned back and closed her eyes. She had not slept well the night before, a constant tightness in her chest keeping her up, though she hadn't mentioned it. Justin had been anxious enough as it was. She didn't want to add to his stress. He was already talking again about having a doctor on standby in London should anything feel off. Aiden shuffled into his row, halfway through, boarding eyes scanning for seat 24B. It was the middle seat. Of course it was. He offered a quiet smile to the elderly woman by the window, already napping under a travel blanket, and nodded at the man in the aisle seat, who barely acknowledged him before planting both elbows firmly on the shared rests. The smell of cologne and airport food lingered in the cabin. Aiden tucked his backpack beneath the seat in front of him, careful not to let it brush against anyone else's belongings. He folded his arms and exhaled slowly. This was it. London. He had made it this far. 4 hours into the flight, the cabin had settled into that strange lull that comes only at 35,000 feet, where conversations slow, cabin lights dim, and time feels like it has been suspended. The engines hummed a steady backdrop as people adjusted pillows and drifted off. Aiden, however, remained awake. He couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety exactly, but from the buzz of anticipation and responsibility. He had an interview tomorrow morning with a program that could alter the course of his entire life. He had read every line on their website, watched every video they posted online. They picked 50 students a year. 50! From across the world. And he was one of them. Or at least he would be if he made the right impression. Unable to stay still any longer, Aiden carefully excused himself from his seat, muttering apologies as he stepped past the dozing man beside him. He walked quietly to the rear galley, stretched his legs, and leaned against the wall, flipping through a few flashcards he kept in his hoodie pocket. Symptoms of pulmonary embolism, risk factors for clotting, indicators of respiratory distress. He whispered them to himself almost like affirmations. From behind a curtain, a flight attendant emerged. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with soft gray curls tucked neatly under her hat. Her name tag read Veronica. "You look wide awake," she said with a kind smile. Aiden looked up a little startled. "Yes, ma'am. First time flying. Hard to shut my brain off, I guess." "Where are you headed?" she asked, pulling cups from the drawer. "London. Got an interview. A medical program for high school students." She paused. "That's impressive. You must be smart." He shrugged, eyes dropping. "I study a lot, mostly at night." Veronica looked at him differently then, not with pity or surprise, but with a kind of recognition. "Well, I hope they see what they need to see in you." Before he could respond, a call light blinked on her panel. "First class." She sighed. "Duty calls. Good luck, sweetheart." Then she was gone. He stood there a moment longer, feeling the strange warmth of encouragement in a place where he expected only to be tolerated. Then slowly he returned to his seat. In the front of the plane, Eugene Miller shifted in her pod, trying to stretch. The pressure in her chest had returned, not sharp, but growing. She took a sip of water, then placed the cup down. Her legs felt heavy. Her fingers tingled slightly. She pressed a hand against her ribcage. Something wasn't right. "Justin," she whispered. Her husband looked up immediately. "What is it? I'm having trouble breathing." Justin pressed the call button without hesitation. A few rows behind Veronica answered the chime. "She can't breathe," Justin said, his voice sharper now. "Get someone. Get help." Veronica moved quickly, checking Eugene's pulse and oxygen levels with the small device she kept clipped to her belt. The numbers weren't good. "We're going to see if there's a doctor on board," she said, her calm voice betrayed only slightly by the urgency in her eyes. A minute later, the announcement came. "If there is a doctor or medical professional on board, please notify a flight attendant immediately." Back in row 24, Aiden sat up. He had caught pieces of what was happening. Breathing problems. Pregnant woman. First class. His thoughts accelerated. Chest pain, shortness of breath, pregnancy. Could it be a pulmonary embolism? His chest tightened. He had seen this before. Helen, his grandmother, had almost died from one. He hesitated. What if he was wrong? What if they wouldn't listen? Another flight attendant hurried past, medical kit in hand. Aiden stood up. "I think I might know what's happening," he said. The attendant turned to him. "We need a medical professional. Please remain seated. But if she's pregnant, and she can't breathe, and she has chest pain, that could be a clot. That could be a pulmonary embolism." Something in his voice made her pause. Not confidence exactly, but clarity. "What makes you say that my grandmother had one?" "I took care of her. I've studied this. Please, just let me talk to the crew up front." Veronica appeared again. She looked at Aiden, recognition flickering across her face. "Come with me," she said. When they reached first class, Justin turned immediately. "Who is this?" he demanded. Veronica didn't answer directly. "He believes he may know what's happening. There is no doctor on board." Justin's face contorted. "You brought a teenager up here." Aiden took a deep breath. "Sir, I think your wife may be experiencing a pulmonary embolism. Her symptoms line up. Pregnancy increases risk. Air travel increases risk. If we don't act now, it could get worse." Eugene tried to speak, but could only gasp. Her fingers gripped Justin's arm. "Please," she whispered. Veronica turned to Aiden. "What do we need to do?" "Get her on oxygen. Elevate her legs. If you have aspirin, she needs one now. If you have anticoagulant injections, check the kit. We need to stabilize her until we land." Justin stood motionless, caught between fear and disbelief. He looked at his wife, then at Aiden, and finally stepped aside. Veronica acted quickly, following Aiden's directions. Eugene's breathing slowed slightly. The oxygen helped. The aspirin went down with sips of water. "We're going to divert," Veronica told the captain. "Nearest hospital is in Dublin." As the plane changed course over the Atlantic, silence hung in the cabin like a held breath. Aiden stayed close eyes on Eugene's chest, counting the rise and fall. Justin sat back, pale, staring at the boy he hadn't wanted near his wife just moments ago. No one said thank you yet. No one called him brilliant or brave, but he had done what needed to be done. And for now, that was enough. The minutes after the flight changed course felt longer than the hours before it. The cabin lights had dimmed even further, and the low hum of the engines became a steady pulse against the pressure in the air. In first class, Aiden Kelly remained kneeling beside Eugene Miller, his hand steadying the oxygen mask that now covered her mouth and nose. He was focused, but not immune to the weight of what he was doing. His heart was racing. Every second that passed could shift the balance one way or the other, and he knew it. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, counted each breath, made sure they weren't becoming shallower. Her skin tone had improved slightly since they got her on oxygen, but the tightness in her chest hadn't gone away completely. Veronica hovered nearby, checking her pulse and glancing at the vitals again. She didn't say anything out loud, but her eyes met Aiden's for a beat, and in that look, there was both caution and something close to respect. Justin Miller stood a few feet away, arms crossed, jaw tight, his eyes fixed on his wife. He wasn't speaking. Not anymore. He had moved past outrage and into something quieter but deeper fear and confusion. He had always been a man of control, a man who believed solutions could be bought, arranged, or negotiated. But at that moment, watching a teenager in a hoodie monitor his wife's breathing, he had no words. He still didn't know who Aiden really was or where he had come from, but he couldn't deny that the boy had done something no one else on that plane could. He had shown up when no one else did. Eugene opened her eyes halfway. Her voice was muffled beneath the mask, but clear enough to be understood. Still here, Aiden smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere until you land safely, ma'am. You're doing great. Keep breathing slowly. We're getting you help." She nodded faintly, her fingers tightening slightly around the blanket. Justin stepped closer. "Is she stable?" Aiden turned to him, voice calm but honest. "She's better, but we can't say stable yet. The oxygen is helping, but if it's a clot, the real risk is whether it moves. That's why we need to get her to a hospital fast." Justin looked at him long and hard, as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. His gaze traveled from Aiden's eyes to the frayed edges of his hoodie, the tired curve of his shoulders, the scuffed sneakers. Finally, he asked more quietly, this time, "How do you know all this?" Aiden didn't look away. "My grandmother. She has COPD heart failure, and she had a pulmonary embolism last year. I've been taking care of her for 3 years. I read medical guides. I shadowed nurses when I could. I watched how they treated her, and I learned. Not from textbooks, though I've read plenty of those too. From necessity." Justin exhaled through his nose a long, conflicted sound. He didn't respond. Not with gratitude, not with apology, just silence. Veronica moved to the cockpit again to confirm their emergency landing route. They would reach Dublin in under 40 minutes. As the plane began its gradual descent, Aiden remained at Eugene's side. He adjusted the blanket over her legs to keep her warm and checked the oxygen flow one more time. The medical kit didn't have injectable anticoagulants, but the aspirin might have slowed the clot's growth. That, combined with her position and oxygen, was the best they could do for now. He thought of Helen, how she had gasped for air that night in their apartment, how the paramedics had praised him for acting quickly, how she had squeezed his hand afterward, saying, "You saved me, baby. I'm still here because you knew." This wasn't the same, but it felt just as urgent. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to be in first class. He wasn't supposed to be the one leading care. But none of that mattered now. It never had. He had acted, and no one else had. The voice of the captain came over the intercom, steady but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Dublin. Medical personnel will meet the aircraft upon arrival. Please remain in your seats as we begin our descent. A few murmurs rippled through the cabin. Most passengers still had no idea what had happened. In the back, people stirred from naps, puzzled but calm. Aiden could feel the subtle shift in cabin pressure. The landing was coming. As the wheels touched down, a muted cheer echoed from a few rows behind. The plane rolled forward, then slowed. The engines groaned as the brakes engaged. A voice from the front announced the arrival once more and gave instructions for the medical team to board first. The doors opened quickly. Paramedics with equipment rushed on board. One of them, a tall man with glasses and an Irish accent, leaned over Eugene, checking her vitals and oxygen stats. He glanced up at Veronica. She was given aspirin. Veronica nodded and pointed to Aiden. He gave the call. Said it was a likely pulmonary embolism. He insisted on the oxygen and leg elevation. The medic looked at Aiden surprised. Well done. That probably made the difference. They carefully lifted Eugene onto a stretcher. Her eyes searched for Aiden as they moved her. He stepped forward slightly, offering a soft wave. She nodded at him. Her mouth moved, forming a quiet "thank you" behind the mask. Justin followed close behind, but paused. He turned to Aiden, face unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something, but instead, he simply nodded, a small, tight gesture. Then he was gone. Aiden stood alone in the quiet first-class cabin, the hum of the plane filling the space where words should have been. Veronica approached. "You okay?" He shrugged, exhaustion settling into his bones. "I think so. You did good, kid. Real good." Aiden didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands, the same hands that had held his grandmother's oxygen tube, the same hands that had steadied Eugene's mask. They were shaking now, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it all. He returned to his seat in economy as passengers began to disembark. No one else said anything. No one clapped. No one pointed him out. He was just another face, another kid in the middle row, quietly packing up his bag. But something had changed, and soon that change would spread far beyond this flight. The hallway outside the emergency ward was stark quiet and bathed in a sterile white glow that made everything feel suspended, like time had decided to hold its breath. Aiden Kelly sat alone at one end of the waiting room, his back straight, despite the exhaustion weighing down on his shoulders. His hoodie still damp from the cold. Dublin air clung to him like second skin. His hands were clasped together between his knees, fingers still slightly trembling from the adrenaline that had only recently begun to fade. Across from him, separated by a few vacant seats and a silence neither had dared to cross, yet sat Justin Miller. He looked nothing like the powerful executive who had stepped out of the Bentley that morning. The confidence was gone. His suit jacket lay folded on the chair beside him, his tie, loosened top button, undone. In his hands, he held a paper cup of vending machine coffee that had gone cold long ago. He wasn't drinking it. He was just holding it like he needed something to do with his hands. Neither of them had spoken since the paramedics wheeled Eugene behind the double doors. It had been over an hour. A nurse had emerged twice with brief updates. She was stable. She was being closely monitored. They were administering blood thinners and running scans. The first time, Justin had simply nodded. The second time, he had asked quietly whether the baby was okay. The nurse had said the fetal heartbeat was strong. He hadn't spoken since. Now he stared into the cup as if trying to find answers inside it. Aiden glanced over at him, then looked away. There was a weight to the air between them, something unspoken that neither of them seemed ready to confront. But it was Justin who finally broke the silence. "You should get some sleep," he said, his voice rough, low. Not unfriendly. Just tired. Aiden shook his head without looking at him. "I'd like to stay, just to know she's really okay." Justin nodded more to himself than to Aiden. He leaned back in the plastic chair, eyes drifting up toward the ceiling before he spoke again. "You said you were headed to London. What for exactly?" Aiden hesitated, then turned slightly to face him. His voice was calm, but there was a firmness behind it. "Interview. Global Future Medics. They pick high school students who want to become doctors. Only 50 get selected every year." Justin looked over at him the first time really seeing him, not just noticing him. "And you got an interview." Aiden nodded. "I had to submit essays, transcripts, recommendations. My AP bio teacher wrote that I had an instinct for diagnosis that can't be taught. I think he just meant I paid attention when no one else did." Justin was quiet. Then, almost reluctantly, he asked, "Was it today?" This morning, Aiden said, eyes steady. I missed it. There was a pause, long and heavy. Justin didn't speak right away. His jaw clenched once, then relaxed. He looked back down at his coffee. You missed it because of us. Aiden shrugged, though the gesture carried weight. Someone needed help. My grandmother always says, you do what's right, even if no one claps. Justin let out a breath that was not quite a laugh. She sounds like a smart woman. Aiden smiled faintly. She is. Taught me everything. She's why I want to be a doctor. Justin tilted his head. She the one you mentioned on the plane? The one who had the same condition? Yeah, Aiden said, his voice softening. She's 73. COPD. Heart failure. Arthritis. We live in a 5th-floor walk-up. Elevator's been broken since December. Justin looked down, ashamed suddenly of the way he had first looked at this boy. He hadn't asked himself once what it meant for a teenager to know how to recognize a pulmonary embolism, let alone act on it under pressure. He had simply assumed wrong. And your mother? He asked carefully. Aiden's expression changed slightly. There was grief there, but it was held with strength. She passed 3 years ago. Breast cancer. I started reading medical books after she was diagnosed. At first, it was just to understand. Then it became something else. Justin leaned forward, elbows on knees. You taught yourself medicine to care for the people you love. Aiden nodded. Didn't really have a choice. For a while, neither spoke. The hallway was quiet except for the occasional beeping from monitors behind closed doors. Justin felt something shift inside him. Slow, but undeniable. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was recognition. He had spent a lifetime in boardrooms talking about impact, about equity, about giving back. But he had never really met someone like Aiden, never sat this close to someone whose brilliance had come not from access, but from necessity. He wasn't sure what to say, so he didn't say anything. Eventually, the same nurse from earlier returned, Mr. Miller. She said gently, Your wife is asking for you. She's stable and alert. We're keeping her for at least 24 hours for observation. Justin stood up quickly. He hesitated for a second, then looked at Aiden. She's asking for you too. Aiden blinked, surprised. Then he stood and followed. They walked side by side down the hall, neither speaking. Inside the private room, Eugene lay in a hospital bed, pale, but clearly stronger. Her eyes lit up when she saw them. My heroes, she said, her voice hoarse but warm. Justin stepped forward and took her hand. You scared me, he said. I scared myself. She replied, then turned to Aiden. They told me what you did, that you knew before anyone else. Thank you, Aiden. From the bottom of my heart. Aiden lowered his gaze, embarrassed by the attention. I just did what I could. Eugene reached out a hand, and after a moment, Aiden took it. What you did may have saved 2 lives, she said, placing her other hand on her belly. Never let anyone tell you it wasn't enough. The room was quiet. For the first time since the flight, there was not tension, not fear, but something gentler. Gratitude, humanity. Justin watched this exchange, feeling the weight of every moment since the first time he had seen Aiden standing in the aisle of that plane. He saw not a boy in a hoodie, but a young man with resolve, intelligence, and a level of grace that had humbled him. As Eugene drifted back to sleep, Aiden stepped out to make a call to his grandmother. Justin remained in the chair by her bedside, holding her hand and thinking of everything he still had to make right. And for the first time in years, he didn't think of that in terms of money. He thought of it in terms of people. The morning light outside the hotel cafe was pale and quiet, filtering through large windows that looked out onto a narrow Dublin street, still damp from the previous night's rain. Inside, the space was modest, not the kind of place someone like Justin Miller would normally choose to have coffee, but nothing about the last 24 hours had been normal. He sat at a small table near the back, one hand around a warm ceramic mug, the other resting on his knee, occasionally tapping as if trying to move time along. He hadn't slept much. Eugene was still in the hospital stable under close observation. The baby, as the doctors reassured him again and again, was fine, safe. And yet he couldn't bring himself to feel settled. Not yet. Not until something inside him had been addressed, something that went beyond medical charts and flight logs. Across from him sat Aiden Kelly. His hoodie was cleaner than it had been the night before. Someone from the hotel must have helped him wash it, but it still held the same shape, the same weight, as if it carried more than fabric. He sat upright, polite, but not stiff, and accepted the coffee Justin had ordered for him with a nod and a quiet thank you. He had not asked for this meeting. Justin had. And Aiden had shown up not because he was obligated, but because something in him respected closure. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, sipping. The air between them was not tense exactly. It was measured like two people trying to figure out how to begin a conversation that neither of them had ever imagined having. Justin was the one who finally broke the quiet. His voice was low, almost unsure, which was unusual for him. "You saved my wife's life, Aiden, and my child's. I can't stop thinking about that. I keep asking myself what would have happened if you weren't on that plane. I keep coming back to the same question. What do I do now? What do I do with that?" Aiden looked at him, not surprised by the question, but cautious in how he approached it. He took a slow breath before answering. "I think you start by listening." Justin nodded, not defensively, but genuinely. "Okay, I'm listening." Aiden placed his hands on the table, fingers laced. His voice remained calm, clear. "My grandmother has COPD, heart failure, arthritis. She lives on the 5th floor of a building where the elevator hasn't worked in months. She hasn't been outside in weeks because I haven't been there to carry her down. When she has flare-ups, we go to a clinic that's always full. Sometimes they cancel on her. Sometimes they just don't take her at all because her insurance doesn't cover enough. I've had to argue with pharmacy techs just to get her medication on time. I've watched neighbors get sick and never recover because they didn't catch something early enough. Not because they didn't care. Because no one cared enough about them." Justin listened closely. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't checking his watch. He was fully present. Aiden continued his tone, never angry, but never soft. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because people like my grandmother don't get to sit across from people like you. They don't get to ask for things. They get told what they're worth by systems they can't change, and they live with that. Day in, day out." Justin's brow furrowed. His hand tightened around the mug. "What happened to your interview?" Aiden gave a small shrug. "I missed it. That program was my shot at a full scholarship. They said there might be other opportunities in the future, but I age out next year. That was my one chance." The weight of those words hung in the air. Justin felt it in his chest, not as a blow, but as a shift, a realignment of how he saw the world and his place in it. "You could have walked away," he said after a moment. "You could have stayed in your seat, and no one would have blamed you. You gave that up for someone you didn't even know." Aiden looked down, then back up. "Some things matter more. I did what I hoped someone would have done if it were my grandmother on that plane." Justin leaned forward. His voice, when he spoke again, was steadier. "So, what can I do? I don't just mean a donation. I mean really do. What do you want from me?" Aiden met his gaze, eyes steady. "Help my grandmother get the care she needs. But more than that, help the others like her. Help the people in our community who keep getting passed over. It's not just about money. It's about access. Staffing clinics. Getting the right meds into the right hands. Making sure people aren't dying because no one gave them a chance." Justin nodded slowly. "I can do that. I have a foundation. I know people. We can build something." Aiden tilted his head, thoughtful. "That's a start. But if you want to do this right, it can't just be about writing checks. It needs to be shaped by the people it's for. Not from the outside. From the inside." Justin was quiet. Then he extended his hand. "Would you help me build it? Would you help design something real? Something that works for your neighborhood? And maybe beyond that?" Aiden looked at the hand for a long moment. Not suspiciously, just thoughtfully. Then he reached out and shook it. "I will. But it has to be more than just good intentions. It has to last longer than headlines." Justin smiled for the first time that day. "Understood." They sat there a little longer, two men from different worlds suddenly not so far apart. Outside the cafe window, the city went about its quiet routines. But something had shifted. A connection had been made, not one of debt, but of shared responsibility. Detroit in late winter was gray, in a way that pressed against the skin like the city itself was holding its breath. The buildings looked tired, brick facades cracked with time. Windows were patched with plastic sheeting. Salt stained the edges of sidewalks that had seen too many freeze-thaw cycles. And yet, despite the wear and the weight, there was motion. People moved, kids played, groceries were carried, conversations happened on stoops and in hallways. Life never stopped, even if the infrastructure did. Justin Miller sat in the back seat of a ride-share sedan, watching the neighborhood pass by through tinted glass. Eugene sat beside him, her hand resting gently on her belly, which now pushed prominently against the front of her coat. She was quiet, alert, her eyes scanning the streets like she was studying something unfamiliar but important. Aiden had given them the address. He hadn't oversold or undersold anything. He simply said, "You'll see." The car turned onto a side street where the pavement buckled at the curb. The building in front of them stood 5 stories tall, its paint long since faded to a dull beige window, grates rusting in spots. A hand-lettered sign taped to the front door read, "Elevator out of service. Use stairs." Justin stared up at the building, then back at the door, then up again, as if trying to reconcile this place with the young man who had sat across from him in Dublin only days ago. He stepped out, holding the door for Eugene, who took his arm carefully, her movements slower, now her center of gravity shifted by the pregnancy. Aiden appeared at the front entrance, a canvas tote bag in one hand, the other holding the door open. He wore a plain white button-down and dark jeans, nothing fancy, but everything was clean, pressed, deliberate. "5th floor," he said. "Sorry about the stairs. We tried to get it fixed, but it's been like this since December." Justin nodded, already slightly winded after 2 flights. He insisted on carrying the gift baskets they had brought, one of fruit, one of teas, and fresh baked goods from a local shop Eugene loved. It was the least they could do. Aiden led the way, glancing back every so often to make sure Eugene was okay. She took her time, stopping to rest every landing. When they finally reached the top, Aiden knocked lightly before opening the apartment door. Inside, the space was small, but spotless. The walls were lined with framed photos, some faded with age, others recent. A young Aiden grinning in oversized clothes, a woman in a nurse's uniform, a graduation photo with a borrowed cap and gown. In the center of the living room, seated in a floral armchair with an oxygen tube running beneath her nose, sat Helen Kelly. She wore a pale blue dress that had been carefully ironed and a cardigan that had seen better days, but had clearly been chosen with pride. Her hair was pulled back tight, her eyes sharp. She didn't rise when they entered. She didn't need to, so she said, her voice low but firm, "These are your airplane people." Eugene offered a smile. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Kelly. Thank you for having us." Helen looked her over, then Justin. Her gaze lingered a little longer on him. Not hostile, just curious. Measuring. "Come in. Don't let all the heat out. Set those things on the table." They did as instructed. The apartment smelled of cornbread, slow-cooked greens, and something sweet baking in the oven. Aiden moved into the kitchen to check on things, giving the 3 adults space. Helen gestured to the sofa. "Sit. I can't hear you standing." Justin sat his posture straighter than usual. Eugene beside him, hands folded. Helen folded hers in her lap. "My grandson tells me you want to help. He tells me you're different. But you'll understand I don't take kindly to big talk. I've seen promises come and go in this neighborhood like weather patterns. Nice when it shows up, cold when it leaves." Justin nodded slowly. "I don't blame you for being skeptical. I would be too." Helen tilted her head. "You a businessman? Yes, ma'am. Then I know you understand leverage. Trust takes more than good intentions." Eugene spoke gently. "We didn't come to make a pitch. We came to say thank you and to listen." That earned a slight softening. Helen looked toward the kitchen. "He's a good boy. Been old since he was 10. Hasn't had a childhood worth naming, not since his mama passed. You know what that kind of pressure does to a young man. Makes him either angry or wise. Sometimes both." Aiden reappeared with a tray of iced tea and cornbread. "Grandma insists we eat something first. Then you can talk shop." They shared a meal at the small dining table, barely large enough for 4. The food was rich, warm, comforting. No one rushed. Helen served second helpings before anyone could protest. Conversation shifted to easier topics. Favorite dishes, how Eugene was feeling the oddity of Icelandic hospitals. Laughter came carefully at first, then more freely. After the plates were cleared, Aiden poured tea and returned to his seat. Helen looked to Justin. "All right now, tell me, what are you really thinking? What do you want from him?" Justin took a breath. "I don't want anything from him. I want to support him. Learn from him if he'll allow it." Helen raised an eyebrow. "You expect me to believe a man like you just woke up one day and decided to care about our side of the tracks?" "No, ma'am," Justin said carefully. "I think I just stopped pretending I didn't live near the tracks. That flight made it hard to ignore the truth." Helen studied him, then looked at Aiden. "And what do you want?" Baby Aiden sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, opportunity, not just for me, for others like me, for the people who raised me, fed me, prayed over me. I want care that doesn't depend on your zip code, doctors who look like their patients, clinics that don't feel like punishment. Justin nodded. We want to help fund a program. A real one, community-based, designed by the people it serves, with your voice leading it. Helen leaned back, processing. She wasn't quick to praise, but she nodded once slowly. Then you start here, with this building. 5th floor, no elevator. A doctor can't help if a patient can't reach them. Eugene reached out, placing a hand gently on Helen's. We want to earn your trust, not buy it. The older woman nodded again, this time with a hint of something warmer. Then let's see what you're made of. You two survived that plane ride. This neighborhood will test you harder. Outside, the wind picked up. But inside that apartment, a foundation was laid. Not of charity, not of pity, but of shared purpose. It was the beginning of something neither side had expected, and exactly what both sides needed. The snow had melted in patches across the sidewalks of Detroit, leaving behind gray puddles and streaks of salt on the concrete. But inside the small community cafe, just 2 blocks from Aiden's apartment, the air was warm with the smell of fresh coffee and something sweet baking in the back. Aiden sat across from Justin Miller at a corner table by the window, a simple laminated menu between them that neither of them had touched. Outside, the city moved in slow rhythms, delivery trucks, kids walking home from school, someone selling oranges from a crate, but inside, a different kind of shift was taking place. Justin had come with something in his hands, a folder neatly labeled, the pages inside, crisp and professionally designed. But he hadn't opened it yet. He had set it on the table gently, like something that needed permission to exist. Aiden didn't reach for it. He looked at Justin, calm, clear-eyed, not defensive, not eager, just present. I want to help, Justin said finally, his voice quiet but deliberate, but not with the usual model. I'm not here to build a clinic with your name engraved on a wall and call it Impact. That's not what this is. Aiden studied him for a moment, then leaned back slightly, his hands folded. Okay, then what is it? Justin opened the folder and turned it toward Aiden, sliding it across the table without pushing. Inside were early outlines of a proposal, resources, a preliminary budget site, options for a community health center. This is a start. We've got the means to do something long-term, not a pop-up, not a tax write-off, something real. Aiden didn't glance at the documents right away. Instead, he kept his eyes on Justin. You've got experience running foundations. I'm sure your team can build a nice-looking center. But how do you plan to make it matter? Justin nodded slowly. That's why I'm here, to ask and to listen. Aiden finally opened the folder and skimmed the first page. He didn't linger on the branding or the sleek design. His voice was steady when he spoke again. Then here's what has to be true from day one. First, this can't be a Miller Foundation signature project. It can't be about headlines or legacy. If it works, it needs to work because the people here built it, because it's run by them, trusted by them, and serves them. Justin nodded, understood. Second, Aiden continued, the board, or whatever governance structure you use, it needs to include residents, not one token seat, not afterthoughts. They need to have power in the room from the beginning. Justin's expression didn't change, but his posture straightened as if something about the conversation had shifted into something more concrete. That makes sense. Keep going. Third, Aiden said, tapping the proposal. Once, no promotional campaigns using our pain, no drone shots of broken buildings cut with clips of smiling donors, no tragedy reels. This isn't charity porn. This is healthcare and dignity. Justin almost smiled, not out of amusement, but out of recognition. You've thought about this. I've lived this, Aiden replied, and I'm not the only one. They sat in silence for a moment as the server refilled their coffee. Aiden thanked her quietly, then added, Fourth, you want this center to make a real difference. Then hire people who don't have to Google what it's like to grow up here. Get doctors who live in the zip code, or at least who understand it. Train medical students from the neighborhood. And don't just open doors, make sure those doors stay open. Hours that match when people actually need help. Languages people speak. Services people trust. Justin stirred his coffee slowly, letting the words settle. All of that is doable, necessary even. And finally, Aiden said, his tone softening, but not losing any edge this place has to outlast the buzz. No one needs another ribbon-cutting ceremony. We need a system that stays when the spotlight moves on. Justin nodded, this time more firmly. You'll be part of it, not just as a face, but as a leader, paid, respected. You'll have say over the vision, the hiring, the standards. You'll shape the program with us." Aiden didn't answer right away. He looked out the window for a long moment. A young boy was helping his mother carry groceries up the cracked steps of their building. A man in a mechanic's jacket waved to a passing bus. The rhythm of life here was unpolished but constant. When he turned back, there was something settled in his eyes. "Then let's do it. But we do it right." The handshake across the table wasn't ceremonial. It was quiet, firm, real. Neither of them looked around for approval. There was no applause, just agreement. Weeks later, in a small rented office with secondhand furniture and a whiteboard covered in community feedback, Aiden sat beside a local nurse practitioner and a housing organizer discussing how transportation vouchers might help elderly patients make their appointments on time. Across town, in a private room with soft lighting, Eugene held her newborn daughter, Casper Helen Miller, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket hand-sewn by Helen herself. Eugene had insisted on naming her for the two women who had changed her life, the one who gave her strength and the one who raised the boy who gave her hope. Later that month, the Millers and Aiden sat together in a community town hall, not at the front, but among the people. Residents asked questions, gave ideas, voiced doubts. Aiden translated jargon into plain language, made space for every voice, and reminded everyone that this was theirs, not a favor, a right. As the meeting closed, Justin leaned toward Aiden and said quietly, "I've spent decades thinking I understood how to build things, but I've never been part of something that feels this honest." Aiden looked at him, then at Eugene holding their daughter, then at Helen nodding slowly in the back of the room. "That's because this time it isn't about control. It's about commitment." And as the lights dimmed and chairs were stacked and the city outside returned to its usual beat, there was a feeling not of resolution, but of beginning. A promise not made in speeches, but in shared labor. Something earned, something shared, something real. The clinic's doors opened at 8 on a gray Tuesday morning without a ribbon-cutting ceremony or camera crews. There were no podiums or oversized checks, no celebrities or speeches. Just a handwritten sign taped to the glass door that read, "Welcome. We're open. Come in." Inside, the space smelled faintly of fresh paint and brewed coffee, the kind poured into mismatched mugs that staff had brought from home. Aiden stood at the intake desk, clipboard in hand, checking over the day's appointments. He wore a navy blue button-down shirt and dark chinos, both ironed with quiet care. His ID badge, hanging from a simple lanyard, read Aiden Kelly, Community Health Coordinator. The title hadn't come with fanfare. He hadn't asked for one, but someone had typed it up, and it felt right enough. The first patient of the day was a woman in her 70s with tired eyes and a thick file of papers she'd been carrying between clinics for years. She had Medicare, but not the kind most private doctors accepted, and she hadn't had a full checkup in over 4 years. Her daughter had driven her from 2 neighborhoods over because someone at the corner store had mentioned the new clinic didn't turn anyone away. Aiden greeted her by name, asked if she needed water, helped her fill out the simple intake form. No questions about income, citizenship, or insurance tiers, just symptoms, medical history, and what she hoped to get out of today's visit. By 9, the waiting room was full. At 11:30, a young girl came in with her mother, both speaking hesitant English. They'd recently moved from Guatemala and had been turned away from another clinic the week before because they lacked documentation. Here, the receptionist born in the neighborhood and fluent in Spanish welcomed them, translated with ease, and scheduled a pediatric checkup for the girl within the hour. Aiden passed by, offered a smile to the child, and explained to her mother that the visit would be covered by the clinic's general fund. No one asked her to prove anything. In the staff kitchen between patient intakes, Aiden poured himself a glass of water and took a breath. The pace was fast but steady. Volunteers were showing up on time. Medical residents from the local university had arrived with sleeves rolled and stethoscopes ready. The nurse practitioner, a woman in her 50s named Denise, moved between rooms with calm precision. At a small desk, a teenager from the neighborhood was helping an elderly man navigate the online patient portal. Every interaction felt deliberate, like a thread being sewn into something meant to last. That evening, after the last patient left and the exam rooms were cleaned, the core team gathered in the back meeting space, formerly a storage room, now equipped with a whiteboard and a coffee pot. Justin was there, as was Eugene, along with 3 community leaders and Aiden. The agenda was simple: review the week, troubleshoot early issues, and prepare for an upcoming site visit from a potential donor group. That's when Justin suggested a modest plaque on the exterior wall naming the Miller Foundation among the founding supporters. His tone was calm, his words measured. He said it might help bring in additional support. There was a pause. Then one of the older residents, Miss Clara, who ran the community garden nearby, spoke slowly but firmly. "I'm grateful for what you helped us build. We all are. But we fought for years to get our own name on something. Let us keep it. Let us own this the way it was meant to be owned." Aiden didn't say much in that moment. He just looked at Justin, who was already nodding before Aiden could open his mouth. "I hear you," Justin said quietly. "We'll leave it as is." The next day, a new doctor joined the team. He was young, smart, and credentialed, came from a well-known hospital in the suburbs, and had volunteered to do rotations once a week. On paper, he was a perfect addition. But by mid-morning, Aiden had noticed something. The doctor was asking certain patients more invasive questions than others. He had requested a urine drug screen for a middle-aged black man with back pain, but hadn't made the same suggestion for a white woman complaining of identical symptoms. He spoke slowly, overly deliberately to non-English speakers, even when translators were present. Nothing overt, just enough. At the end of his shift, Aiden approached him in the hallway near the coat rack. "Can I give you a quick note before you head out?" he asked. The doctor nodded, casual, oblivious. Aiden looked him in the eye. "In this building, we treat symptoms, not assumptions." The doctor blinked. "Excuse me." Aiden didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. After a beat, the doctor nodded, muttered something about needing to be more careful, and left. The message had landed. That night, Aiden walked the quiet halls of the clinic. He passed the empty waiting room, the still warm intake desk, the locked pharmacy cabinet. He paused by the glass door and looked out at the street. Snow had started falling again. Just light flurries, no wind. He thought about his grandmother asleep upstairs, oxygen machine humming. He thought about the girl from Guatemala, about the man who hadn't had his back pain believed, about the kid helping patients register, about what it took to make a space like this not just possible, but permanent. The building wasn't big. The budget was tight. The world outside was still loud with inequality. But inside these walls, something had shifted. This was no longer an idea. It was a place, a practice, a beginning worth protecting. Aiden turned off the lobby lights and locked the door behind him. Tomorrow, they'd do it all again. By the end of its 3rd month, the clinic had become more than a place people came to for care. It had become a rhythm in the neighborhood, a kind of steady pulse. Kids walked past it on their way to school, waving through the glass. Seniors gathered at the corner outside after their appointments, talking recipes and rent. For a stretch of blocks that had gone ignored for decades, it felt like someone had turned the volume back on. The local paper had done a feature. Then a city councilman stopped by unannounced just to look around. And not long after that, the Foundation for Scalable Care, a national health equity organization backed by several large donors, requested a meeting. They came in clean suits with warm smiles and carefully worded admiration. They'd read the impact report. They'd watched the interview Aiden had given last month, reluctantly quietly seated in a worn clinic chair, and they spoke of him like he was a new kind of leader. They had ideas. They had funding. They had a vision. They wanted to replicate the model across 7 cities, beginning immediately. The proposal was generous, full operational support, hiring infrastructure, nationwide PR. All they asked in return was integration. They wanted consistency, centralization, a single brand for all sites, one name, one board, one guiding hand. Justin sat across from Aiden at a long table in a borrowed conference room, the documents laid out between them, crisp and bound. Eugene sat to the side, listening. She didn't speak much, but her eyes were sharp. Aiden's fingers rested lightly on the proposal. He didn't open it. Not yet. "What happens to our board?" he asked. "They'd be invited to advise," one of the representatives said, "but final decisions would come from a centralized team. Streamlined. It helps with accountability, and hiring still local if approved by standards. We'd have to vet candidates." And the name, the woman smiled gently. "Unified branding. It's how we build trust at scale." Aiden didn't smile back. He sat still for several seconds, then quietly pushed the folder an inch forward. "We'll think about it." That evening, word had already begun to circulate. Someone from the clinic had seen the visitors arrive in their black car, wearing badges carrying thick briefcases. Rumors spread fast. By the end of the week, a town hall was called. The meeting room above the library filled to capacity. Folding chairs squeaked under shifting weight. There was no microphone, but no one needed one. Clara, the woman who tended the community garden and helped organize blood pressure screenings every Friday, stood first. Her voice was steady. "We built this," she said, looking at Aiden, then at Justin. "Not just with money, with sweat, with mistakes, with compromise. And now, folks who never saw us want to own what they ignored." A younger volunteer, a nursing student who handled scheduling, spoke next. "If the board moves to New York, will they know that Mrs. Daniels doesn't do mornings? Will they understand that some of our patients need reminders in person, not by email?" Justin tried to clarify. He talked about growth, about impact. "We could help thousands more," he said. "This could be the start of something much larger." His voice was calm, reasonable, but he felt something in the room harden against the words. People weren't angry. Not yet. They were hurt, defensive, protective. Aiden said little during the meeting. He watched, listened, took notes, not on a laptop, but in a narrow notebook he always kept in his back pocket. After the meeting ended and the chairs were stacked, he stood quietly outside, jacket zipped to the chin. Snow had started again, the kind that melted when it touched the ground. Eugene came out beside him, arms folded, her breath fogging the air. "They're scared," she said. "They should be," Aiden replied. "So am I." Later that week, he found Helen in her usual chair, a blanket over her lap, her oxygen steady. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. He didn't explain everything. He didn't need to. "They want to expand," he said. "I heard," she said. "They want to change the name, the board, maybe the values." Helen didn't blink. "Then don't let them." He nodded slowly, frustrated. "But what if this is the only way to reach more people?" Helen leaned forward just enough for the blanket to slip slightly. "Then make sure they're reaching the right thing. Don't protect the model, protect the purpose." Aiden breathed out through his nose, long and slow. "I don't know how to do both." "You do," she said. "You're just scared you won't be allowed to." That night, Aiden stayed late at the clinic. He stood alone in the intake office, the light overhead buzzing faintly. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started to write, not a press release, not a policy memo, but a framework, a set of guiding principles. It was simple. No community-owned model could be reproduced unless the community defined it. Any expansion must preserve local leadership, resident boards, non-conditional care. Any doctor who worked under the name must undergo training in lived context care. No name changes. No marketing built on poverty. No statistics without stories. It wasn't a rejection of growth. It was a blueprint for meaningful growth. When he met with Justin the next morning, Aiden handed over the document. "If they agree to this," he said, "I'll help scale it. If not, we keep doing what we're doing. Here." Justin read through it slowly. When he finished, he looked up. There was no surprise in his eyes, just respect. And perhaps relief. "You've written what I should have known to ask." "We all learn," Aiden said, "even the ones who taught themselves." Later that week, the Foundation for Scalable Care declined the terms. The funding didn't come. The name didn't change. The clinic stayed as it was. And somehow that felt like progress, because what they had built wasn't built for sale. It was built to last. The air was still cold, but spring had begun pushing through the edges of the neighborhood's small bursts of green, between cracked sidewalks, the return of birdsong in the early morning. Inside the clinic, the thermostat ticked softly. The buzz of a coffee maker echoed down the hallway, and light spilled through the front windows, warming the floor tiles near the reception desk. It had been nearly a year since the clinic opened its doors, and nothing about it felt new anymore, but that wasn't a loss. It was something closer to belonging. The novelty had given way to routine, and routine meant it had survived, not because of press, not because of outside funding, but because people kept showing up. On a Tuesday morning like any other, the waiting room filled with familiar rhythms. Clara checked in 2 seniors and waved at the third before he reached the counter. A nurse practitioner adjusted her schedule because one of her patients had transportation issues and couldn't make the morning slot. A young intern from the neighborhood who had once sat in the clinic's very first teen medical mentorship group now wore a white coat with her name stitched above the pocket. Her mother had come in that week just to take a photo. Aiden walked the halls with a clipboard and a pen tucked behind his ear, not as a boss, not as a founder, but as a piece of the system that ran on shared trust. He paused to help adjust a patient's walker, offered to grab a granola bar for a diabetic client whose blood sugar had dropped during intake, and nodded at a volunteer coordinating translation for a family from Yemen. No one stopped him for praise. No one followed him with cameras. That was the point. He had become so familiar in the landscape of the clinic that no one asked what he did anymore. He just did it. In a small room off the main corridor, a regular weekly meeting was underway. Not a press event, just a group of local leaders, patient staff, and volunteers gathered to assess the week's flow and plan ahead. Eugene sat near the back holding Casper, now a wide-eyed baby, who made everyone smile even on the longest days. Justin stood to the side, tapping notes on a shared screen, but offering no speeches. He had learned over time when to talk and when not to. Today, he chose not to. A staff member presented an idea to host a mobile vaccination clinic for nearby housing units. Another offered insight about medication availability after Medicaid changes. A high school student brought up an issue with internet access at home, impacting appointment reminders. Every voice was given space. Every voice mattered. After the meeting ended, the room emptied slowly. Casper fussed in Eugene's arms, then settled. Helen had come to the clinic that day too, in her wheelchair oxygen tank in tow, guided by one of the newer volunteers who had learned exactly how to lift it over the sidewalk crack outside. She sat watching from the hallway as the team packed up. Her eyes moved from face to face, some old, some new, some who had once come as patients and now stayed as part of the staff. Aiden noticed her and came over. "You good?" he asked, crouching down slightly to meet her gaze. Helen didn't answer right away. She studied him the way she always had, like she could see the version of him from every age at once. "I used to pray," she said quietly, "that the world would see you, that they'd stop looking past you. But now I pray they see what you helped build, and that they protect it even when you're not in the room." Aiden looked down for a moment, the edges of emotion surfacing in his chest. When he looked back up, his voice was steady. "It's not perfect." "No," Helen replied, "but it's yours and theirs, and that makes it enough." That night, Aiden stayed late to walk through each room one more time. He ran his hand along the countertop in exam room 2. He checked the label printer in the intake area. He scribbled a note on the dry erase board to remind someone about ordering gloves. Outside, the streetlights flickered to life. Kids passed on bikes. A mother pushed a stroller slowly past the front window. She didn't look in. She didn't need to. In the back office, a binder sat on the shelf labeled with bold black letters, "Community Protocols, Non-Negotiables." It contained every lesson learned, every boundary set, every piece of hard-earned policy that made this place what it was. No data dashboards, no marketing plans, just agreements. A framework born not from whiteboards, but from listening over time to what people needed and who they wanted to become. There had been no miracle, no overnight turnaround, no dramatic transformation. Just people making small right choices day after day until they added up to something that could stand on its own. That was the story no one told often enough, that the real work wasn't shiny. It was persistent, patient, personal. As Aiden locked the front door, he glanced once more at the name painted above the entrance. It hadn't changed. No corporation had claimed it. No politician had rebranded it. It said only what it needed to say. "Welcome. We're here. Come in." And as the lights went off one by one, there was no applause, just the quiet of a place that was still standing, because people believed it should. Thank you for staying with us through this true life journey, a story not about miracles, but about people choosing what's right, one quiet act at a time. If this heartwarming story moved you, we invite you to share how it made you feel in the comments, and join us next time for more real human stories that matter.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.